All right, so this is a really new concept with factoring trinomials, and I'd say in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c, and this is where a equals 1. So all these, it's just going to be x squared plus or minus something at the end. So once we get really good at when a equals 1, factoring these, I'm going to show you some other methods when this number is greater than 1. But for right now, we're just going to focus on when a equals 1. So here are your steps. First thing we're going to do is always set it up in factored form. So what it means to factor is we're dividing out and making it look, and I'm going back a few notes, making it look like it did before you would have multiplied two binomials. So if I'm looking back through my notes, when we have this as a final answer to when we multiply this, we're now essentially taking this and making it look like that. So that's kind of our ultimate goal with this section. All right, so the first thing we're always going to do, especially when a is 1, we're just going to set up a factored form. So I always say this takes no mathematical talent at all. You set up two parentheses and whatever the variable is, in this case x, and you do that. So that's step 1. So everybody should be able to handle that. Next step is you're listing the factors of c. All right, c is that last term, the constant. Now factors are numbers that multiply to equal another number. So you're always going to start with 1 in that number, and then you're going to use your calculator to kind of guess and check. Step 3, of those, which ones combine or add to equal your b term. And then once you get those factors that add to equal your b term, you're going to put them in this section. So here's our first example. I think it's just easier as you do it, and I explain as we go. So if we have this, and we're going to factor it out, and these are all factorable terms. When they're not factorable, there's another method that we're going to use to do that, but that's for a different lesson. So for this one, we are going to write out our steps with our two parentheses in the x. I already did that for you. And then we list our factors of 12. Now, for some of these, they're pretty obvious, especially if it's a plus. They're both positives, and we don't really have to worry about negatives and like a negative times a negative equals a positive and that sort of thing. But for the sake of the notes, I did that anyway. So our factors of 12, I always start with 1 in that number. Then you can go the negative version and the negative version, because a negative times a negative is a positive. And then you just guess and test other numbers up from 1. So 1, then we go 2. So if I do 12 divided by 2, that equals 6. I'll go ahead and bring up the calculator and how I do this. So if I'm having 12, I'll do 12 divided by 2. Oh, it's a whole number, so that works. So 2 and 6. Then I'll try 12 divided by 3. So that works. It's 4, and then I'm at 4. 4 would be the next one I check, so I have exhausted all of my factors at 12. So when I look at this, and this is tabbed out a little bit weird, but here are all of my factors that multiply to equal positive 12. So negative times a negative equals positive, a positive times a positive equals a positive. So now we go through these and we add them together. And which one combined to equal b? So in this case, b is positive 7. So which one of these, and if it's factorable, one of them will work, will equal positive 7. So if we add these together, and this is kind of redundant, but this would be 13, this would be negative 13, this would be 8, this would be negative 8, this would be 7, and this would be a negative 7. That looks. So we obviously are looking at our 3 and our 4. So positive 3 and positive 4 is our two numbers that add to equal 7. So when we look at our first step, when we write our two x's, we write these within there. So a plus 3 and a plus 4. It doesn't matter if the 3 goes here or the 4 goes there, but that is our factored form for this. Now, if I were to multiply this back out, you would see that I would get this answer. So x, 3, x, 4. You don't have to do this step, but I'm just showing you why it works. So x squared, 3x, 4x. This would be 12. There's our like terms, the 3 and the 4. So x squared plus 7, because 3 plus 4 is 7, plus 12. All right, so step 1, do that. List your factors, which ones add to equal the middle number, and then just write them in there. So let's go ahead and do a couple examples. So over here, I'm going to start by just writing out my two x's in the parentheses. Now I'm going to list all of my factors of 10. So always start with 1 in the number. So 1 and 10. And we also have -1 and -10. So if we're dealing with positives, it could be two negatives are there. So that's not it. So we have 10. We also have 10 and 1. So we have 10 divided by 2 would be the next factor I would check. So we have 2 and 5. And -2 and 5. And as you do this, once you notice that you get one that adds to equal in the middle, you can stop. So if we look at this, which one of these will add up to equal +7? Well, it's going to be a +2 and a +5. So we just put those in there. +2, +5, and that is your factored answer. All right. Over here, again, write out your two x's. This is going to be the same whenever that a is a 1. So it's basically we're dealing with something squared and then a bunch of other stuff. So now I'm going to write out my factors of 30. So 1 and 30. And if they're both positive, we're never going to deal with negative numbers. So I'm just going to write out the positive factors of 30. So 30 divided by 2 gives us 2 and 15. 30 divided by 3, 3 and 10. So you can see that's going to be 13. I'm going to keep going. 30 divided by 4. It doesn't come out as a whole number, so that's not 1. 30 divided by 5. So you have 5 and 6. And now that I'm at that number, I can stop. Sometimes I like to go in order rather than just guessing random numbers. So I'll start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and whatever comes out as a divisor as a whole number, I know that it's a factor of that number. So now that we have these listed out, which one of these add up to equal 13? Well, it's pretty obvious here. The 3 and the 10 equals 13. So a +3, a +10. So that would be your factored form. On the next page, all right, so now it kind of gets a little bit trickier here when we get into where we have negative and positive numbers. So now that they're not both positives, we're going to have to pay attention to those signs. So let's list all of our factors of 42 here. So I already did step 1, step 2. So we have 1 and 42. And again, it's +42, so -1 and -42. 42 divided by 2, it gives us 21, and then -21. So 42 divided by 3, so 14, and -14. 42 divided by 4 does not come out, that's why I didn't put it there. 42 divided by 5, that doesn't work. 42 divided by 6, oh, 6 and 7, so oops, so that would be 7 and -7. So now you're asking yourself, which of these pairs, so group 1, you know, the positives and the positives and the negatives, add to equal -17. So if we're adding, we're not going to add two positives to get a negative number, so I'm going to focus over here on my negative numbers. So which ones of these add to equal 17, or -17? Well, that's going to be -43, so that's not going to work. 2, and that would be -23, nope. -3 and 14, so 14 plus 3 would be -17. Aha, so that is the one that I need to use. So which ones equal -17? We have -3 and -14. So from our first step, we just write that in there. -3, -14, and that is our factored form of that. All right, so we're going to do these two sample problems. So make your x's in parentheses. Now I'm going to list my factors of 25. So I have 1 and 25. Let's see, does 2 work for 25? Probably not, because it's an odd number. So 25 divided by 2, no. 25 divided by 3, no. 25 divided by 4, no. 25 divided by 5, yes. So 5 and 5. Now also, when we were talking negatives, it could be negative 1 times negative 25, or negative 5 times negative 5. So of these four, which ones add to equal negative 10? Yep, your negative 5 and your negative 5. So that would be minus 5, and that is your factored form. And then sometimes, if you notice that these are the same, you can write it out as x minus 5 quantity squared. It's both the same thing. All right, let's try this one. So I'm going to write my x's. Let me switch colors here. So do your parentheses, x and x. So we got to look at 36. I'm going to bring up the calculator. You always use your calculator just to double check we're getting everything we can. So 1 and 36. 36 divided by 2. 2 and 18. 36 divided by 3. 3 and 12. So as we go, we can also use the negative version of both of these because we're dealing with a positive. So I can stop there because I know that 3 plus 12, I know that 3 plus 12 equals my 15. So if you want to stop there, you can. You could keep going and get all your factors of 36. So 36 divided by 4, 4, 9. So 9 plus 4, that's not going to equal 15. Let's see, 36 divided by 5, no. 36 divided by 6, oh, yep, 6 and 6, we know that. So again, which ones add to equal negative 15? And when we have a positive c, we can take the negative of each of them. So negative 3 and negative 12 is going to equal negative 15 when I add those together. Negative 3 plus a negative 12 gives us that negative 15. So those go in here, negative 3, negative 12, and you have your factored form there. All right, so we will pick up here when it's plus and negative, and I'll do that in part 2 of this section.